everyone. I am Hassel Aviles, and you are listening to We Have Lived by Not 9 to 5. This will include the highs, the lows, and everything in between. We may talk about some difficult topics. We may cover mental health and substance use challenges. We want to have a real open dialogue about what it's like to work in the hospitality industry. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to We Have Lived by Not 9 to 5. Today, I am so excited to have an incredible new guest. And for those just tuning in for the first time, I do want to share a little bit about our intention with the podcast is to learn from each other. And I'm here to tell you about experiences I have lived. I'm here to listen to experiences you have lived. And the podcast is here to share experiences we have lived. This will always include highs, lows, and everything in between. We may talk about difficult topics. Mental health challenges could be part of that. This will always happen through the lens of lived experience and intersectionality. And for those that don't know, Not 9 to 5, we're a nonprofit global leader in mental health advocacy and education, specifically with mental health and substance use challenges in the hospitality and culinary industry. Our community is vast, so that includes restaurants, bars, hotels, breweries, wineries, and more. I'm the founding director of Not 9 to 5, and I helped create this nonprofit and these conversations and, contribute to other conversations that were already happening in the last couple of years. But when I was growing up in the restaurant industry, there were no conversations. It was all silence and shame. It was all repress and suppress your emotional experiences. It was all check your shit at the door and constantly made to feel disposable, specifically even for my mental health challenges. And although there was high rates everywhere, there was little to no conversation. So I'm really grateful to be able to have this podcast come to life with our partners from Terms of Service Network. And we're really grateful as well to the Drake Hotel for hosting us and letting us turn one of their hotel rooms into a podcast studio. And so here we are in Toronto, and I am not going to read your bio to you, Ren, because I don't do that, and I hate when that happens. So I always like hearing from people themselves. Tell us, for those that don't know you, Ren, a little bit about who you are.
I'm Ren Navarro, and I'm exhausted.
Yeah, so real.
I think that bios are weird, right? Because bios are always like the best parts of you. And I think that being honest about it and being like, I am really tired, yo. I think at this point now I'm just a woman who does everything and anything.
You are.
I know, right? So my background is I'm an English major who worked in finance for much too long.
Right.
And did a lot of corporate. And then the joke is always that corporate leads you to drink. And then I ended up in beer. And so it's been 12 or 13 years being either in beer directly or adjacent to it. And so for the last 5.5 years, I've been running Beer Diversity, which is now kind of morphed into B Diversity, which is now under the umbrella of B Diversity Group. Partially because More Than Beer needs help. And so I do a lot of DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, education, and conversations, and tastings, and whatever's are needed in this incredibly fucked up world that we live in. So, so that's my 3,000 word bio.
So I have watched this evolve over the last few years. This latest evolution of rebranding and I guess making the content of your work and the specifics of your work more generic versus industry specific. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that? And this is just me getting curious. Yeah, because you and I haven't talked.
We haven't talked in a while.
Full transparency, I do know Ren. We've known each other for a really long time, but we haven't caught up as much through this rebranding and transition. So can you catch us all up?
Yeah. So the rebrand was kind of this weird secret project. So
I love
the
secret
rebrand.
projects.
So because the company had turned 5, I was like, it's time to refresh the logo. So the original logo was done by a high school friend, Matthew Magnus, who shout out to him. He's an amazing artist and does logos and branding and stuff. So he did the original logo when I was very beer centric. And so with time, though, I started working with like schools and colleges and corporate things that were like, hey, we can't really use your logo that much because like beer and we're around like kids or whatever.
Right.
So I was like, okay, then I need to change anyway, and I want to make something a little different. And so Fellows Agency, which is based in KW, had done some stuff for another friend of mine who had done a rebrand with one of his breweries. And I said, you know what, I think I need to talk to you guys. And so I said, I need this refreshed, but I also need to create a new logo that is just B diversity, and the letter B can represent anything.
Right.
Right? So it can be beverage diversity, it can be just the B diversity, and like brave diversity or whatever, right? So
Right.
it's I wanted the letter to do whatever.
Okay.
And so that logo became a thumbprint. Because, the story is like everyone's fingerprints are unique. And then of course there's that small sector of the world who are like, I don't have fingerprints. I'm like, that's still unique. So it's like, do crime. I don't condone crime.
Just kidding.
But I mean, unless it's against rich people, but anywho, so I, in May, rolled out the new logos because I was just like, this is the time. And so I'd kind of started creating social media for B diversity. And as time was going on, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I had some issues happen in the middle of the year that really changed my outlook on things.
Okay.
And so I thought, okay, I'm going to secure names and I'm going to do all these things. So I secured every business name under this sign. Shout out to my lawyer. And, and just kind of had said, you know what, the website is beer diversity and like everything is just pointing back to beer diversity, and I need it to not be so drink centric.
Okay.
And so B Diversity Group was the umbrella that was created. So like the website's been changed. And so I went through and kind of removed a lot of explicit references to alcohol, because in the last 5 years I've done handfuls of things with like City of Cornwall, City of Toronto, and like, so it wasn't I'm hoping to get into those non-alcoholic sectors. It was like, I'm already there, but I need to strengthen it.
I see. Okay. But just to clarify, you're still doing what you were doing before. You've just now supplemented?
Yeah, I think so the beer diversity stuff still continues, and I still do a lot of stuff with breweries and those in the industry, so wineries and distilleries and all that fun stuff. But everyone has a diversity problem.
Yes, unfortunately. Yes.
Right? So it got to the point where it's like, well, people read my stuff and they're like, oh, but you're just a beer person. And I was like, no, I'm so much more than just a beer person.
Okay.
And so changing the names and kind of streamlining it and saying that like beer diversity still exists. It's not going anywhere. It's
that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, it's my baby. Some days I want to punch that baby in the face, but it's still my baby. And so now the logos are presented together. So they don't usually sit separate anymore, because I want people to be like, oh wait, these are both you, and you do both.
Cool.
So that's been the big push.
All grown up.
All grown up.
But now your branding has caught up with what you're actually doing.
Yes.
So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I finally,
really good.
It feels really good. I mean, I had some forced time off.
Right.
So the forced time off sucked for the first little while, but then it was like, oh, let me get into what I need to get into. And so sitting down and updating my website felt amazing, because a lot of the photos are from 5 years ago. And, for people who know me, like, I haven't had a haircut in like 3 years. So and guess what? I'm getting my first haircut on Friday. Like, 3.5 years. But the photos were so old and I really looked very fresh-eyed and like had no idea of the horrors that waited around the corner for me. And so I needed some photos that kind of, I don't look exhausted in the photos, but I can see in my eyes that I have changed. And that's what I wanted to put out and put forward, to be like, it's not just me holding a beer all the time or like in, beer branded clothing. And so I feel that the website is a little bit more grown up, and like, not to knock it. I think it's been really great. And, I've had some really good friends do the photos and like do the website and stuff and the updates. So I feel like now it's more representative of what I'm doing and what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I'm curious if, You can tell us a little bit of a hospitality story. So before we go into questions, I like to do this little icebreaker around hospitality stories because they're some of my favorite stories. But you get to choose, as long as it's from your own lived experience, you get to choose whether you tell me a funny, a favorite, or a fucked up story.
This will be all of three.
Perfect.
So I used to, and I still do it, used to be a beer buyer for a restaurant, and I still do it for a couple of places just to stay current. And so this was, I don't know, like, this was pre-pandemic, so it was probably like 4 years ago. And I'm sitting at the bar because I would come in every morning and, early and chat with the bartender and kind of walk them through things and do like tasting quizzes on the spot. And so I'm sitting there and I'm having my old lady breakfast, which is a cup of tea and some toast. Incredibly British. I'm from Trinidad. We were colonized. Tea is my jam. So I'm sitting there and I'm having this, whatever. And so this rep comes in and I don't know, it's like probably just before 11. Mm-hmm. And he's already like, hey, I'm looking for the person who handles beer. And I was like, hey, buddy, that would be me. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. So he sits down, we start talking, and he's like telling me about his beer. And then he's like, and I knew this was coming. Because there's always a look when you're like, you're going to stop talking beer and you're going to ask me questions about me and my knowledge. And that's what he did. So he asked me basically like what my pedigree was. And I was like, cool. Like I've worked in breweries. I've worked at like a bunch of different breweries. They're all award winning. I've done sales. I've done this. I've done this. And I have these certifications and blah, 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 blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Sips tea. And he was like, oh, cool. Like, I've got this amazing pedigree. And I was like, then why are you a sales rep right now? Sips tea. And so he's like asking me questions. And I suddenly realized that he's come in to sell me beer, but he hasn't brought me beer. And that's kind of weird. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're selling a product, you usually bring the product.
Yeah. So
I say to him, hey, so did you bring samples? And he's like, yeah, they're in the car. And I was like, cool, do you want to go get them? Because at this point, it's after 11. And
it's the whole point.
And so he's like,
job.
yeah. I'll go grab it after. And I was like, cool.
Okay.
So we keep chatting. He's telling me some stuff. And I was like, yeah, like we used to bring your beer in. But then like there was no rep for a bit and blah, blah, blah. 15 minutes go by and I'm like, do you want to bring me some beer? And now I'm starting to sound like I am having issues, right? Like early morning, like I need beer. And I'm like, oh, but I'm sitting at a bar. Sir, this is fine.
Like, that's not what's happening here.
So he's finally like, yeah, I'm going to go to the car. I'm going to get the beer. And I was like, oh, amazing. So he goes to the car. He comes in, drops a 4-pack and he's like, let me know what you think. Here's my card, and walks out. Halfway through this conversation, he had asked me a couple times if I drank beer. And I was like, yo, body by beer. Of course I drank beer. So he left before he could see if I had a beer. Which I was like, that's kind of weird, but okay. So, whatever. So a couple weeks later, I'm at an event. I ran into him again. I'm getting ready to leave. And he's like, what's good? So I tell him like, oh, this beer is really good. This beer is really good. And he's like, oh, can I get you a drink? And I was like, no, I'm good. Standing there with a glass of water in my hand. And he's like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh no, this man really thinks I don't drink beer. Right. I have run into this guy so many times. And every time I've run into him, I'm not drinking anything.
Come on.
So to this day, he believes that I don't actually drink beer and that I just got really mad at him because he figured it out. I was like, shit. So to this day, this man thinks I don't drink beer. Like he has told other people. He's like, no, she doesn't drink beer. Yeah.
I'm stunned.
Yeah. So he went from grilling me to being like, you don't drink beer to like never having it like proved.
Now he's never going to believe it.
He's never going to believe it. Mm-mm. Next time I see him, I'm just going to have to like shotgun a beer and be like, see, I drink beer. Except I can't shotgun properly. So it'll just be like a total mess.
Yeah, me too.
And I'll just choke on it and be like, oh, I swear I drink beer.
Oh man. You know what's so funny about your story? I feel like everyone has interactions like stories like that. Like they're so memorable and it's so hilarious that you keep running into.
And like I think the part of it for me is that it's kind of this trope where he could be any rep, mm-hmm. right? He could be any rep of a certain age mm-hmm. who, when they see that it's not a white guy, no knock on white guys in beer, but like once they notice that the beer buyer is not what they expected, mm-hmm. the way that they talk, the way that they like approach things is so different. And it's just like infuriating, first off, but like, I mean, same spot. And I remember this kid came in and he was a rep And he asked for Matt, who used to handle the beer, and I had taken over. And so one of the gals at the front was like, oh, he's not here, but Ren's here. And he was like, no, I deal with him. And I was like, I can hear this whole interaction. And I turned and I was like, well, if you want to hit your sales targets, you're going to have to talk to me.
Oh, right.
So we started off on a really good foot. And then, like, he explained beer terms to me. And I was like, no. I've been drinking longer than you've been alive. But, like, it's these things that, you know, I mean, like, they're
explaining.
Also, like, you're a fetus. Like, chill. But, like, thanks for explaining that term to me. But
so insulting.
But I think that that's the thing, right? And it's like, so if I were in wine, if I were in spirits, like, this would be the same story.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people who are known names in these are getting these questions from people who are like, but do you know what that means? And it's like, yeah, it means that I'm giving you a 30-second head start to start running. I don't run often, but if I have to, it's going to be dangerous.
Yeah, you don't want that. I don't want that.
I don't want it.
Okay, so listen, that just actually, this is a great segue. That includes some things that we don't love about our jobs and our careers and our industry. And you alluded earlier about feeling exhausted, and that resonates a lot with me. But I'm curious if, to kick off our convo, you can reflect on a few favorite aspects of your career these days.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I don't know if it's these days, but
or, you know,
I think I lie.
Year.
I've had some really great experiences. I was in Pittsburgh not that long ago, which Pittsburgh is so great. Also, you can drive there. Because fun fact, I hate flying. Okay. I do a lot of flying. So I was in Pittsburgh to work with two breweries.
Sweet.
Necromancer and Trace Brewing. And they're two breweries that give back to the community. But we're like, we want you to come in and do a staff session because we want to like get up to date on things. And we don't want to just be like, we do good, so we're good.
Right.
And having moments like that, I mean, I have some Canadian breweries too. Parallel 49, which is in Vancouver, and I do, you know, I've been with for over 3 years. Are ones that are like, we want to get it right and we want to get it better, and we understand we have things to learn, you know. And I think that the experience of sitting down with a group of people who are like, we do good things, but need to like brush up on some stuff. Mm-hmm. It was probably one of the best trips I've had in a while. And, you know, I mean, I'm in Pittsburgh, so it's like, it's great anyway. And the way that things are changing out there, but the community outreach that both breweries did, the way that they talked about things, the way that they acknowledged that a safe space is a concept and not a reality.
Yes.
You know, one of the staff members was like, safety is a vibe. And I was just like, yeah, it is, because it's not a guarantee.
Right. And it has to be created.
And so just, you know, like a few days with them was so eye-opening and so refreshing. And not to say that the other stuff I've done isn't fun or isn't, you know, doesn't make me feel good. I mean, sometimes I'm just like, oof. But to have that as kind of this recent moment of talking to a room full of people that were both learning from each other, and then seeing that some of the stuff that they were doing was immediate turnarounds. And it wasn't like, oh, yeah, we'll get to it like next quarter when we review whatever. Some of the stuff they had in place within like days of us meeting.
Wow. Oh, well, that would leave me it like feeling so
it was great.
Different.
It was so good.
So many times I think it's, if you get to see impact.
Yeah.
I'm not saying immediate change. I'm not saying immediate gratification, but just a hint of impact.
Yeah.
That quickly, that's so promising.
And
that
I think
would make
that
me feel so.
And I think that was like part of the thing with Parallel too. You know, initially they were very like, what are we doing? And to see what they were doing. And again, like it took a little bit of time because change takes time, though I feel that social media makes people think that you can change within an hour. And it's like, yeah. Oh yeah, it's cool. Like, let me just tear this building down and rebuild it to your specifications. Yeah. But to see them too and see the things that they've embedded within their culture and kind of these like refreshers and those pieces just, I don't know. I mean, they make me like, I don't want to be like, my heart's so happy about it. But my heart's so happy about it.
I just think it leaves, you know, a sense of hope. And I think oftentimes we feel hopeless. So, it's if you can get that little bit of hope. And also I think it just says so much to see so many things happening to the work you're doing. That the fact that you're growing to me is a great indication of hope. The fact that you have returning clients.
Yeah.
The fact, obviously there's so much more to do. And obviously there's so much fucked up shit about this industry that it can easily feel like, to what end am I doing this
I know.
for?
There's
both and, I guess is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Right? I think sometimes we get caught up in the binaries, but there's so much nuance to this type of work. And acknowledging that you do have moments of hope and clients that make impact is gotta feel fucking good.
It feels so good.
Yeah, I can see that. So speaking of all the changes in the industry we'd love to be making, in the last couple of years, there's been so many, and I'm curious which ones stand out the most to you?
In terms of good changes?
It can be negative. It can just be changed.
So negative.
I know.
I think that for the last couple of years, I think that in 2020, because we were all convinced we were going to die, people made really solid changes. And also, it was the year of are you willing to take a stand? And so there were a lot of folks in alcohol who were like, I don't really want to affect my bottom dollar. And I was like, oh, you just did. So I think 2020 was an odd one. Those who did it rocked it for as long as they could. Mm-hmm. And then I get that capitalism dictates you can only do charitable things for so long. And then I think that shortly after that, people were starting to really vote with their dollars. Because we could start going out again. Mm-hmm. And if you were going to go and spend money, you needed to make sure that they weren't secretly racist, or they weren't going to fuck up your shit. Mm-hmm. So, value statements became really important.
Love that.
And so, especially in the last year or two, breweries especially were always but we're good people. And I was you can't call yourself a good person. You can't say that you're safe. You can't say these things. But what you can do is put an accountability model in place, and that's your values. And then someone can decide, I agree with these or I don't agree with them. And if I don't agree with it, I'm not coming in. And if I come in and I'm I don't agree with it, then you can be hey, dude, you got to go. And
here's
these are
why. Our values. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that I did a lot of values work in the last year and a half. From conversations like this to conferences to work with breweries, a little bit outside of breweries. So, kind of alcohol adjacent or corporate stuff. And it was really interesting because people kept saying, well, but people know we're good. And I was but if I don't even know who you are, how do you tell me who you are? Because I'm not going to trust you if you're just yo, black lady over there, I'm good. It's oh, okay. Sure you are. Is this the free candy van? No windows, rocks up, I'm a good person, get in the van.
Exactly.
So I think that was kind of the big positive piece, but it also allowed bad actors to get caught much faster. Mm-hmm. Well, you have values. You said that you were doing these things, and you're evidently not doing them. And so to be able to allow other people to do it, because people would always call me and be Ren, is this person good? And I was I don't fucking know. They were 3 months ago, but I don't know if they are today.
Oh, I feel that. Because I get asked that for workplace mental health a lot. So which are the equitable workplaces? Which are the restaurants that are treating their staff well? And it's an impossible question to answer. What you just said, they were 3 months ago. That's real.
Yeah.
There's so many instances I've seen where there's such high turnover rate that I don't know what's happening today. I know it was happening, like you said, 3 months ago.
Yeah.
But the people I knew that I spoke to all left. So, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's not. Maybe it's because they've put in new, policies or processes. It's so hard to know. So I love that so much. And I'm curious, with all of that happens and all the things that, I think are harmful and potentially toxic or, challenging in other ways. With all of that I know for me what the impact has had on my mental health. And I'm curious, as all these years doing this work, what impact has it had on your mental health? Obviously, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Oh my God, no, it's
and
fully.
I know we could be here for hours.
Yeah, I know.
But
so the truncated version is last year I got diagnosed clinically with. I have general anxiety disorder, which has been diagnosed for 20 years. Diagnosed with ADD, which has been 17 years. Depression from a few years ago, and then I got clinical burnout because it's like Pokemon, you got to catch them all. And so last year I got that. I have a really great therapist that I've been seeing for the last 2.5 years.
oh, that's amazing.
So she was like, yo, you are burned out. And I was like, I know I'm getting burned out. And she was like, no, you are burned out. And so I read a bunch of things and she was like, listen to this podcast. And she was really great because she already understood all the other aspects of what I go through. So she was like, listen to a podcast because I know you live for podcasts and do this book on tape or whatever. So it was great.
Oh, wow.
And so I was going through stuff. And then this year, mid-year was a mess. And so in June, I had a call with her. It's all virtual.
Okay.
And so, which allows me to do work and stuff. So we did a virtual call, and the first words out of her mouth were, I have never seen you look so burned out. And that was when I knew I was not okay. And that was in June. And I thought, oh, okay. I can't even hide it anymore. And she was like, you don't look good. And I'm in Halifax and fucking Airbnb being great. And
right.
right. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got 2 more days of this conference.
Seriously.
And so I was like, yeah, I'm not okay. And so we started doing more therapy sessions, and I was up to weekly. I'd been bi-weekly up before then. And she was just like, yo, let's just talk, right? And sometimes I think just having that ability to converse about things was really great. And so it was the point where I understood. I always knew that my mental health wasn't great because, I'm diagnosed with these other things and I've been living with it, and how do I adapt? But the burnout hit really hard, which surprised me. Because I've been burned out before. But again, it was in my 20s where I was I'm burned out. So maybe I'll just stop staying up till 4 a.m. Because it was very simple. And I mean, I say simple, air quotes around simple. But this year was really hard. And so it took me probably up until last month to get to a point where I'm yeah, I don't feel so crispy fried. And having to make some really big changes. But yeah, it's hard also to get people to understand. Because of the work I do, and I'm the person, right? So there are DEI consultants throughout Canada. I'm the only one who specializes in alcohol. So I'm it. There's a bunch in the States, but I'm it for Canada. And if I'm wrong, please tell me because I need an app that someone else can take over. But knowing that there was so much always coming to me and so much happening, and then not being able to get away from it. Because also, as a Black queer woman, I can't just be oh, cool, I'm not going to work, so now I'll just, live my life. So having the, kind of the double whammy of it. So I really just, part of it was the brakes were hit for me. But then I was I think I'm going to keep my foot on the brake.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think I'm finally in a better spot. But I was also being really honest with people. And I find that the second I was honest, and not everyone can do this, and I understand that this is a privilege. I was very honest on social media. And I was posting here are the signs of burnout. Here are the books I'm reading. Here's the workbook I'm using. Here's the link to the podcast I listen to, right?
They're so good.
And the number of people who reached out who were oh shit, that's me.
Yeah.
And it was because we don't talk about
Correct.
this. And I am no mental health expert. I am.
No, but you have lived experience.
But I lived it. And I was here's how I lived it. But here's how I masked it. And here's how it hurt me. And here's how it continues to hurt me.
Right.
And so I think that having those, 3 months of extensive posting about it, mainly in stories because I didn't want it to overwhelm.
Right.
I'm not a mental health advocate. I'm a person who's living with it. So I was just here's my story. Really allowed people to have different connections with me. And I tried to answer every DM that I got if it was in relation to mental health.
That is So hard to do what you just described. I really relate to your story, and I so appreciate you sharing that so openly. I think it is more common than we think, and I think there's so much stigma still, unfortunately.
Yep.
And I hate that we're still stuck at awareness because I'm really trying to move us into action, and I'm constantly thinking about how to move things into practice versus just ideas. But you're right. We are still in a lot of stigma and a lot of awareness. And even folks like us that know so much and do so much still have these Mack trucks that hit us and that force us to stop and to realize that something very serious is happening. And it's so amazing that you have this therapist that can help you through that experience.
Yeah.
But it is you doing the work. Listen, I preach to therapy and therapists, but don't underestimate how much you are doing the work.
Yeah, and I think that was really hard for a while too, because I was very like, my therapist carries me, but it's
I
like
used
no,
to be the same.
right? But it's like, oh, if she gives me a thing to do and I don't do it, right? It's like if you have a personal trainer and you just work out at that moment and then you go home and like
you're like, why are there no changes?
Right? Because I just ate 4 bags of chips. They were tasty.
Oh, my story. Yeah. How'd you know? Who told you?
Because it's my story. Also, what's a personal trainer?
I don't know. I heard they exist. But you know what? It's the burnout thing is real. One thing I want to say about burnout, because I think it's a misunderstood concept, and I've actually done a ton of talks and workshops and stuff about burnout from a lived experience lens. I'm also not a mental health professional. But I have learned a lot about burnout in the last couple of years. And what surprises me is that it's a term that gets thrown around like every day, like, oh my gosh, I burned out from that meeting, or oh my God, and it's these kinds of words that sometimes get misused around mental health. I know that they can seem like fun and funny and casual, but for those that live with it, it's not fun and funny and casual. And burnout can actually be really dangerous, especially if untreated or unacknowledged.
Yes.
But what I wanted to say about burnout that's happened in the last couple of years is that we're starting to turn the conversation more towards the environment you're in. Yep. So it's more of like a byproduct of what you are living with, whether it's burnout in family, burnout in relationships, burnout in the workplace, burnout, there's different ways in which to define it. But I thought that lens was so interesting because I used to in my 20s internalize it as I'm broken, I'm the problem, I need to self-care, I need, individualize it. Yep. And in the last couple of years, I've now learned so much about how much of burnout comes from having to make lifestyle changes, workplace changes, like everything you just shared in your story really tracks with the research and data.
Nice.
And the fact that like you had to reevaluate, you've had to make hard changes. That is, it's so important to acknowledge that because so many people think it's them. Yeah. And really it's just you're having a natural reaction.
Yeah. And I think that, that's like, especially with hospitality and drinks where we have to be on, and like that is part of what leads to that.
Yes.
It's not your true persona. It's not your true self. And you're putting on this masking that it's not you're doing it for 20 minutes. You're doing it for hours or days. And then when you finally do get the break, you are so tired that you don't get to be your real self. And I think that, again, because things are open and we're running around and we're doing things again, like we suddenly have gone from like, I haven't gotten out of my comfy pants in like 6 months to like, oh, I have to put on hard pants and like drive a car somewhere.
It's true. It's so real.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so listen, outside of the things that we've talked about already, someone could also hear about your job or look at certain aspects of your social media and think, man, the beer life looks so fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like they might think that it's just nonstop access to parties and tastings and trips and travel. And I know from personal experience that sometimes, obviously social media is such an illusion and everything is not what it seems. But what are some challenging aspects of your job that you think, viewers from the outside don't know?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people always say, oh my God, you get to travel. You're so lucky. And it's like, okay, I hate flying. I've always been a homebody, and I am an introverted extrovert. So it's like, it's super draining. There's so much to do. There's so many routines and rituals that I have to do. I think that what I would love people to understand is that I do it because I want to help other people. I want to learn from other people. There are party shots, there are party moments, like, not gonna lie, but I've also made a bunch of lifestyle choices and changes because, when I got into the beer industry, everyone drank. You drank so much. I, as a rep, used to abandon my car places constantly because I'd be like, I can't drive home.
It's so dangerous.
And it's so dangerous. And, and I had some health issues come up because of excessive drink and had to stop drinking for months while I was a rep.
Wow.
And I was just like, this sucks. So, it's like when you go to the doctor and your doctor's like, how many drinks do you have? And everyone lies.
Especially hospitality people.
And I think the time before I went to my doctor, I had started tracking, and I told her the number, and she freaked out. And I was like, no, for real. I'm tracking it. And she was like, yeah, that's still really high. And I was like, would I reduce? And she was like, what were you drinking before?
Right.
And I told her the number, and the look on her face, I was like, oh, right. People outside of this industry don't do this because that's not what you do. And so, realizing that and taking it into all of this work that I do, I'm trying to get away from photos or presenting that what I did was nonstop fun. So I usually, if people follow me on Instagram, they see that I'm starting to do more reels. But the reels are I went for a walk and took pictures of buildings, or took pictures of graffiti on the ground that says it's some motivational thing. And then there's going to be beers because I'm going to drink them, but it's not going to be I drank 15 beers on this trip. You'll see one or two because they might be branded for the place that I'm at. So I'm trying to be a lot more aware of what I put out because I can't live the illusion.
Right.
And I don't want to live the illusion.
Right. Or put out that it's not your authentic life.
Hell, I'm pushing 50. So it's
yeah.
I am not the partier that I was when I was 25.
Same.
And so I think that kind of putting it out, and and now I'm doing non-alcoholic sections on my Instagram because I want people to understand you can still have a good time.
Yes.
And you can still have something really tasty. And so I'm talking about wine and spirits and beer, not because I want other people to feel comfortable, because I want to normalize it. I drink these things. The things I am posting, I am drinking in my house. And that is my kitchen counter in these pictures. And I think that doing that and having a lot more of that also brings people in who for the longest while were like, I can't be on your Instagram because you don't speak to me. So I think that with time and kind of this rebrand and refresh, I want to show more of the reality of things and, be very honest and not just be shiny happy all the time.
Yeah, it's more transparent, more honest. Yeah. And I think that is always what attracts people, when you can feel that when someone's being dishonest.
Yeah.
So in the last couple years, I feel like I've had a lot of interesting conversations that have been very vulnerable and honest and transparent. We had one earlier this year that really landed with me, and I would love for you to talk about when we met earlier this summer. At one point, we were talking about being asked to and expected to work for free and labor that goes unpaid, and these expectations that are asked of us that are full, real jobs that people get paid for. And for some reason, there's this expectation or assumption that we're going to do it for free. Can you talk to us a little bit about your personal lived experience with this amazing topic? Sarcasm, fully.
I now have a tattoo that says, fuck you, pay me.
Yes, you do. I can see it.
Yeah.
For those who are listening to this.
There it is.
There is a tattoo on Ren's wrist that says, fuck you, pay me.
And it faces outward because I pay myself enough. I think that there was a period of time when I started the company that it was very any exposure is good exposure. which I mean, again, old enough to know better, but
We all do it.
But when you're building a brand and you're building these things, you'll either take less money or you'll take no money, and you'll we'll do a partnership and these kind of pieces. And then I guess probably like a year in or so, I was like, I'm gonna change some stuff, because hey, can I ask you a quick question? Automatically means that I don't want to pay you for it, but it's a big question. It got to the point where it was like, I have a mentor who's a really good friend now, Dr. Jackson Beckham, who's in the States, and she does DEI stuff, and she's amazing. And she's
wonderful,
so fucking smart. Said to me once, if you give someone that information and they turn it into $1 million idea, what do you get out of it? And I thought, well, I don't want to have like the feel good moments of like that person just made $1 million with my idea. And so I changed my rates. I changed how I did work. I changed how people were able to approach me, because the thought of giving $1 million idea away for free. And like, this happens when you do conferences. And so like, yeah, I do conferences and I was doing them, but I'm also cutting down on them. Because I got tired of, I think part of it that hit me really hard was I was doing work with a brewery that would pay me for things. But one of the owners said to me, oh, the best piece of information I ever got from you was this webinar. And we use it all the time. And I thought, oh, you didn't pay for the webinar. And you just told me to my face that you use my webinar on hiring and retention all the time in your company.
Oh my gosh.
But you don't want to pay me. But we've worked together before. Like, it was just this moment where my brain like broke, and I realized like I gotta stop doing things that live, right? Like live in the internet that people can just access. And like, yes, there are things that, I get paid for, and then it sits behind a paywall or whatever. But yeah, fuck you, pay me.
Summary of the story.
That's it.
Fuck you, pay me. It's hard to transition from that you said you did in the beginning to what you're doing now. Again, this is kind of for my own curiosity too, but like, you have a mentor, that must be helpful. That's amazing. But I guess, what is like a small way you can transition? If you're still, for anyone listening that might still be in that, but I'm new and I'm growing and I'm,
I think talk to people who are around you. Like,
okay, that's good advice.
So Dr. J was my mentor for the first like year or so, and now we're just friends. Right now we just like text and chat and kvetch. Reach out to people and say, hey, but don't reach out to be like, hi, can you tell me everything to do? Reach out and be like, this is the thing I am doing.
Right.
I see that you do something similar. Do you have time to just chat? Do you have time for me to buy you lunch or to buy you a coffee or a quick virtual conversation? If not, I fully respect it. Because my thing is not to steal from you. I just want to like chat with you. And I mean, for me, the difference is that most people who do this are American based.
Okay.
Anyone who's doing it in Canada is doing either as a nonprofit or just kind of a side project. So that is the difference. But don't be afraid to talk to someone, right? Like, the whole like shoot your shot thing.
Yes.
As an aside, I did a talk for a class at Niagara College. And I said to people, if there is someone you want to work with, shoot your shot, do the thing, and be like, but tell them, here's what I can bring you.
With value, yeah.
With value. Here is the value I can bring you and give you for the interaction and for the knowledge. And one of the women in the class is a theater designer, Robin Fisher, shout out to her, and drew a picture of me that says, fuck you, pay me. And I bought the image off her later on because it's so bang on. And so like that was the moment. And so we still talk and we still do things. And she said to me, you said, shoot your shot. Don't be afraid, but always tell someone what you can do. And so it's the same thing if someone is looking to do this moment where they can take the next step. Don't just be like, yo, can I pick your brain for info? Anyone you say the words, can I pick your brain? They have stopped listening.
I hate that.
Because that's what corporations and businesses say to them all the time. Explain it. Be heartfelt. My message to Dr. J was so nerd. I follow you on Twitter and I love you so much and I just want to talk to you about this thing and here's what I'm doing. And she was like, you're adorable. Of course I'll talk to you. And you can do that. Just be honest, right? And just be like, maybe it's, I don't know if I want to do this, but here's what I've been doing and here's the thing. Worst comes to worst, they say no. Best case, they say yes.
That's what I always say. The worst thing they can say is no. I can vouch for this strategy. I've done this before. I've even, without even sliding into a DM or emailing someone, I've even followed people that I really admire or like want to learn more from.
Wait, on Instagram or on the street?
On Instagram. Could you imagine?
Sorry, I just picture you like running down the street, hiding behind trees.
I become a spy. Did I tell you that's what I do now? No, just kidding. But yeah, and then they follow you back.
Yeah, which is the best moment.
That's an epic moment. But even when that doesn't happen, I have also done what you're saying, which is reach out via email or DM or however, and been vulnerable and always provided value.
Yes,
but always been very transparent and honest and about what my ask is, and it's surprising.
It'll get you further than you think.
I agree.
It really will.
It's surprising where it leads. Even if they say no, you still learn something.
Yeah.
And I think it's a weak muscle that probably most of us could benefit from strengthening.
For sure.
You know? Okay, so a lot of what your work in the industry is around inequity and oppression, racism, how white supremacy shows up in our industry, and I've experienced that firsthand. But what do you wish more industry leaders were focusing on?
I think industry leaders need to understand that they have to lead.
Oh.
I think the biggest issue that I run into is that, a company or an organization will have 50 staff members who are like, we want to make a change. And leadership or ownership will be like, no, we're good. Everything's fine. And you cannot have 50 people making change when the one person who makes all of the decisions, holds the purse strings, says yes or no, is like, no, we're fine. And I think that, and I'm not saying, people who are working like stop trying to make change, but it becomes more of an uphill battle. And it becomes these pieces. So for me, it's like, if you are in a leadership don't turn your nose up against it. If you are like fully all about capitalism, think of it as making more money. Do you want to make more monies? You do. And I think that there is this fear.
That's so honest.
Right. And there's a fear of alienating a very small percentage of people who are pretty shitty, who don't spend enough money, who are yelling very loudly. And people like us are saying, well, they're blocking the door, so I don't want to come in. And so, yeah, I think that it's got to be leaderships have got to get out of this weird, it's a 1990s mentality of like, if we show we have emotion, people won't buy our stuff. And it's like, dude, I lived through that. We're not like that anymore. We're all broken. We're all looking for places that we can come back to over and over again. And if this is not the space, well, guess what? I'm not going to come back.
And we'll find the right place that does.
Who's probably 2 doors over from you. So you'll see me all the time. And I'll be like, I'm good. I'm going here.
Yeah. Every time. Oh, that's so good. I love that you started off with industry leaders need to lead.
They do. Stop being cute in the corner.
They need to actually do their job of leadership.
Fuck, man. I just I
fucking love that answer so much, though. You're no, they just need to lead. I'm like, yes, Ren.
Yeah. I just so I don't, usually I don't shout people out, but I just did some work with Partake that says non-alcoholic
beer. Yes.
Ted.
I
love that man so much. And I've known him for years. I've met him when he was first starting, and he brought me samples in a parking lot. But he's involved in things, and and it's not. And I'm not saying the leaders be there all the time and touch things, but he's there, and he's present, and and those in the higher echelon, C-suite, if you want to be fancy, they all showed up. They were in the space that I was in to talk to the staff. And he spoke up, and one of the other guys who was there also spoke up, but not in ways of, well, actually, we don't do that. They were just like, oh shit, we didn't think of that. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about show up and be the expert on the thing. Just show up with your staff, be in the space, put your phone down for a second. I get it. I live on my phone. My wife wants to throw it in the ocean. That's not the moment. Let your staff see you.
Yeah.
Nodding your head
Present.
Or looking confused or whatever, or ask a question. And I think that you don't have to do it all the time, right? Leadership is not a 24/7 endeavor. But when it counts, show the fuck up. I've done sessions where like companies are having huge issues and C-suite is nowhere to be seen. And it's like, why are we doing this?
And leaders are the ones that have the most power and privilege in a business.
They can say yes or no.
They set the tone for the workplace. Even, obviously, it'd be great if we had more distributed leadership and more flattened organizational structures. But let's be honest, there's still a lot of hierarchy. And those that are in higher positions, they have so much power to be able to set the tone differently. And also, if they're not practicing something, but they're talking about something, everybody sees that.
Yeah. I just, and again, I'm not asking for this like kumbaya moment. It's just like, do it every so often. It might feel weird at first. I guarantee it will feel weird at first. But don't you want to show your staff, like, show them that you're learning too and that you're figuring it out. And and when I see it happen successfully, it's so beautiful because it also allows the staff to hold them accountable because they know that they were in the room with them. You heard the message. Why didn't we do anything about it? You said we were going to do something about it. And I think that people who aren't true leaders don't like the accountability model and don't like being questioned.
I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of times too, there's still a lot of like ego.
Of course.
That exists where they almost don't want to look like they don't know something. But I think by pretending that you do know something that you're clearly not actually doing, it's not a good look.
Yeah. And
everyone sees through it.
And that's the thing, right? Everyone sees through it. They'll call you out on it. And I think that, the companies that I'm still working with are very open and they admit, like, we don't get it. But like, a lot of those meetings, ownership and C-suite are present. And they might be like, I don't understand this. Or they might be like, oh, I've heard this before, but I'm still going to look engaged because I know that my staff's watching me. Exactly.
And it gives them permission then to do the same, right? If you're vulnerable, vulnerability is contagious. Yeah. It starts to spread throughout the culture. And listen, like you said, it's not always going to be sexy. It's not always going to be easy. And it might be clumsy. Sometimes you might stumble. I think that always happens, especially when you do something for the first time. So that leads me perfectly into our final question. I am a huge fan of Dr. Brené Brown, and she coined a term FFTs, which are fucking first times. And when you do something for the first time, it can feel very, like we just said, awkward and vulnerable and stressful, and you might just suck at it because it's your first time, but it is a natural part of the learning process.
Yep.
So can you share maybe a latest FFT and how you manage it?
Oh, wow. I feel like this rebrand is the FFT.
That is vulnerable.
Because I got really comfortable, right? I got very comfortable and I got, my business changed after 2020 and got very like, I'm always booked. And then when it came to a screeching halt and I had to relearn some stuff, and I hate using the word pivot because it's not a pivot. Because it's not a pivot. Like a pivot tells me that you have changed the trajectory of where you're going completely. And I'm still going to the same spot.
Right.
Still going to hell in a handbasket and I can't wait. But I think that like having to understand and to like, this is the first time that I've had time to take a deep breath. This is the first time in quite some time that like my mental health is still shaky, but it feels really good. This is the first time that I've got a twinkle in my eye again. Because, the burnout was so bad that I would tell people like, people were like, how are you? And I was like dead inside. Like that was my response. I think that this is the first time that I'm starting to still be busy and starting to do things that make me happy and starting to work on things that inevitably will be something that, we talk about like leaving your legacy that I am proud of. And so this is my FFT era.
Yes.
And so I think that for the next little while, there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that changes, that grows, that allows me to continue in certain ways, starts to, give me that moment to take a deep breath and say, was that what I still wanted to do? or do I want to do it slightly this way? And so I think that is the piece. That's that big chunk that I'm really excited about. And as I get older, I realize that there are certain parts that early days and early me were very like, but that's really important. And now I'm like, it's not as important to me. It's still important to other people, but I realize that I can take a step back and say, this is the part that I'm going to refer you to someone else who is really jazzed about this, because I'm not jazzed about it anymore. So, my FFT is finally like listening to the inner Ren who says, why are we doing that? Do we want to do it? Let's do something new.
Can I have an inner Ren?
Inner Ren sleeps a lot and snores terribly.
I'm obsessed though. Like my favorite epiphany I've had in the last couple of years that came from the pandemic was discovering the Nap Ministry on Instagram and Trisha Hersey's work. If anyone hasn't heard of Trisha Hersey, please Google. And the book Rest is Resistance. Yep. I'm not exaggerating. Literally changed my life. Yep. It changed my brain. It gave me language for what I was experiencing that I didn't even know I needed. And it totally made me realize that, I come from immigrant parents, and the laziness thing was drilled into me hard. Yeah. And they did the best with what they could. I don't hold it against them, but it almost made me afraid of rest.
Yes.
And Trisha Hersey has given me like that power back to see rest as sacred.
It's so good.
It's so sacred. And to realize that like actually some of my best work comes post-rest. Yeah. Some of my best ideas come because I've given myself a little bit of time and space. And this shit's so fucking hard to do. And I'm not trying to make it seem like, take a nap and everything changes. That's not what I'm trying to say.
I've taken like 3 naps in 20 years. So I'm not like, naps are great. But that was a Dr. J recommendation. She had said to me, like, follow the Nap Ministry and understand what women of color are expected to do, and that, the notion of like rest is resistance. And it's so good.
It's so important. So anyways, your inner Ren resting a lot lands really in my heart. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Ren, you're amazing. I could talk to you all day, but I know you have a million things to do. And so I will let you go. But thank you for being here and sharing so openly. I adore you, and I love your work. And I hope that whoever's listening checks out your new website.
Thanks.
So this has been another episode of We Have Lived. Thanks everyone for tuning in.